live sarà tutta in inglese e il tema è Orchard Core CMS. Quindi vi introduco subito l'ospite di oggi, arriva dall'Ungheria, il suo nome è Zoltán Lehóczky. I hope, Zoltán, that I pronounce your name in better way as possible. Okay, it was fine. Nice to meet you and welcome here. Welcome here again because you went in Torino.net user group some years ago, if I remember.
That's right,
okay. Yes, I remember. After that, Zoltán, I want to let you introduce yourself, introduce your talk, and then you can speak as you want. As always, I want to remember to our guests that there will be chat during his speech, but also I should be like a moderator so that sometimes people that is writing will be on live and will be an interrupt for you. Okay. Sometimes instead we will give all the questions to take at the end of the presentation. Okay, Zoltán?
Yes.
If you agree. Okay, Zoltán, you can speak now. Welcome.
All right. And thank you for the introduction in Italian. Unfortunately, I need to give this talk in English because my Italian is very minuscule. But I hope you will still enjoy it because why I wanted to bring this talk to you is because, well, as .NET developers, you are probably also working on web development. And when you are doing that, then probably you are still sometimes reinventing the wheel in your projects. You are still sometimes doing the same thing over and over again instead of relying on a CMS, pretty much, and just getting all the basic features of a web application and the whole community with it for free. So let's get into that. I'm Zoltán Lehóczky, by the way, from a company called Lombiq Technologies. We are working extensively with Orchard Core, but more about it later. Now, before even talking about Orchard and whatnot, why you would use a CMS to begin with? Just to clarify, by CMS I mean content management system. Now, there are some advantages to it. Well, first of all, what I started with, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. If you use a CMS, then you get a whole package of features that you can use with your web application. Secondly, it's also a framework. So when you are extending that CMS, when you are adding your own features, you get some kind of framework where you can plug your functionality into. You get all the basics of how to add features. You don't really have to think much about how to structure your application, what kind of basic APIs to use for data access, logging, localization, all the basic stuff. And certainly, it's not just about the code, because you also get a community, and with it, you get community support. And if the CMS also has a company behind it, you can get support from that company. Now, Orchard is not like that, because there's not a single company behind Orchard, because Orchard is a community-driven project. This is the tagline of it. I won't read it because you can read it faster, but let's dissect it and let's try to understand what Orchard Core actually is. Well, first of all, it's open source, pretty clear. It's also modular. That means that while an Orchard application or an Orchard using ASP.NET Core application by default is a monolith, although you can split it into microservices or multiple services, in this monolith, you have modularization. Orchard itself has something like 200 projects. Almost that many packages are out there that you can use from Orchard selectively. You can, for each package, you can decide whether you want it or not. You can use the whole of Orchard, or you can just use specific features. You can just use the content management part without a lot of further functionality. You can use just the basic services. You can mix and match, and you can override everything. It's very flexible. It's also multi-tenant. And multi-tenancy is quite a useful feature. It means that you have a single application and you can serve any number of websites from it. So seemingly, for all the users, it will seem that all of these websites are independent. They have different domains, different content, different configuration, different users, but they are hosted from the same application. That's multi-tenancy, and it can help a lot if you host applications and websites for your clients and you want to increase the site density. Orchard is not just a CMS, but also an application framework. So what I mentioned in the beginning, Orchard actually provides all of that.
Zoltán, just
yes?
only a question from me. If you need your slideshow, I can add to the stream. Okay, maybe we have.
What I'm showing you now is not on the
stream.
Stream.
Now I'm streaming. Yes, now I'm streaming. Okay. Because I thought that was a little introduction or yourself, but I understood that after that you have introduced all the CMS. Okay, now we have. Okay.
Yes, please show my screen.
Yes. I think that we have just jumped 2 or 3 slides that were completed.
Yeah, just to not to keep the audience hanging. What I've shown you until now was this slide.
Yes.
This slide, but I already explained everything, and this slide with the Orchard tagline.
Of course, yes.
So Orchard, as mentioned, is an application framework and the CMS, so it provides what I explained in the beginning. And of course, we are talking about .NET, so it's for ASP.NET Core. By the way, that's an important thing, because when you are working with Orchard, you are not creating an Orchard application, but rather you are creating an ASP.NET Core application and adding Orchard to it. And as mentioned, you can selectively add the features of Orchard to it, what you want, be it the lower level framework features or the higher level user-facing features. Now, Orchard actually targets .NET 6 and 7 both. The policy here is that Orchard always targets the latest .NET version, and if the latest .NET version is different than the latest long-term support version, then it targets both. So come November, with .NET 8, which will be the next long-term support version of .NET, then Orchard will target that. Orchard itself, by the way, is following the MVC paradigm and uses ASP.NET Core MVC. In your own applications using Orchard Core, you don't necessarily have to follow the MVC paradigm, but that's one of the options. As mentioned, it's open source, and it's actually under the umbrella of the .NET Foundation. It's a very active project with thousands of commits, hundreds of contributors, and a lot of issues in the issue tracker as well. But it's not just that there are a lot of issues, these are being closed as well. So it's not like people are complaining and nothing happens, but the community is actually fixing those bugs and implementing those feature requests. There's actually also an Orchard 1. Orchard didn't start with Orchard Core. There was Orchard 1, or it was just Orchard or Orchard CMS, as we called it at that time. Now we call it Orchard 1. This was the original Orchard version. It's the legacy edition of Orchard. It's built on the legacy.NET framework, the legacy ASP.NET MVC, and it's a pretty huge project as well. It's still supported, but when it comes to new projects, we of course recommend using Orchard Core nowadays. And since I already talked about Orchard 1 and Orchard Core, the whole thing actually started back in 2009 when Orchard was first published on Codeplex, which, if you haven't heard of it, was the GitHub of Microsoft, before Microsoft actually purchased GitHub. The 1.0 version of Orchard was released in 2011. That's when I actually started working on it. And it was 2014 when the community started to work on Orchard Core. And it took until 2021 to say that, okay, this is now a 1.0 version. This took so long because, if you may remember, at the time, .NET Core was very, very unstable. It changed rapidly between .NET Core 1, 2, 3. Huge changes came, and .NET Core 3 or 3.1 was when we say that, okay, the whole platform is now stable enough, Orchard Core can be stable too. As mentioned, I'm from a company called Lombiq, and why I'm talking to you about Orchard Core is because, as mentioned, I've been working with Orchard for more than a decade now, and in the company that we started with my business partner Benenek, we have been working with Orchard for exactly a decade now as well. Actually, Lombiq was born out of Orchard, so we started Lombiq because we wanted to work with Orchard in an official form. And since then, we have become the biggest Orchard team out there, and worked with clients like Microsoft itself, Live Nation, or the Smithsonian Institution. Now, why would you use Orchard? Because there are other CMSs out there for .NET Core as well. Now, Orchard really utilizes everything that you already know about ASP.NET Core and ASP.NET Core MVC and adds stuff to it. Everything you know about ASP.NET Core MVC or ASP.NET Core alone still applies. We are working with that, but Orchard builds on top of that. You are creating an ASP.NET Core app, and then you are adding Orchard Core to it. And Orchard provides a lot of user-facing features and a lot of framework-level features. For example, it's mainly a CMS, so of course it provides content management features. It has a very flexible and very extensible content model that I will also show you. All the other basic functionality that you may use for any web app is also there, like user management, media management, multi-tenancy, as I mentioned. And there's one thing that that's probably less obvious, but that's also part of my story, how I became a professional .NET developer, because it was because of Orchard. Because when you are joining a huge quality open source project like Orchard, you can become a lot better developer, because it's like working in a huge team. You join the project, you feel around the code, you learn a lot from the code, then you try to contribute small things, you then contribute bigger ones, and through that you learn a lot. If you are relatively in the beginning of your career as a .NET developer, I highly recommend joining a quality open source project like Orchard. It's incredible how much you can improve. Because, by the way, Orchard is sometimes also written by those people who work on ASP.NET Core itself. And of course, it's not just a software, but there's also a community. It's not a huge one. So when it comes to Orchard Core, we are still talking about more like a niche community and a niche application, not something like WordPress. But still, it has a pretty large community, and a very welcoming one and helpful one, I would say. And this picture is, by the way, from our last in-person conference in New York. We had a much larger conference, like 5 times larger, a month ago online. Now, a lot of talk until now. Let's see Orchard in action, actually, and I will show you a couple of websites that are run by Orchard. This is, by the way, mixing Orchard 1 and Orchard Core sites too. Let's start with this website for a Transformers game. It's not a hugely complex website. It's actually a mini site for a marketing campaign. Why I'm showing you is because, well, probably you know the franchise Transformers. And by the way, this is also an example of Orchard's multi-tenancy, because such mini sites, a huge amount of such mini sites are created by a company that that works in the video game industry, and they launch these all the time. But there are some more complex websites running Orchard as well, like the site of the Royal Veterinary College. And of course, it also has cat pictures, so that's kind of an important thing when you are in the internet. But Orchard is not just about like content websites. It can also drive more complex and more interactive web applications. Now, Fly Egypt, this website is a website for an airline, and it does everything that you expect from an airline website, including a complex booking system that you can access here. Huge brands also use Orchard, like Live Nation, as I mentioned, that we worked with them in the beginning. House of Blues is the brand of Live Nation. Live Nation itself is a Fortune 500 company, an event organizing company, and House of Blues is their brand for event venues and pubs. So there are a couple of dozens of event venues and pubs that they run under this brand in the US. And well, this is the website for them. And by the way, this is also a multi-tenant website. But governments use Orchard as well. Let's start from the city governments. The city of Santa Monica, which is part of Greater Los Angeles, also uses Orchard for pretty much all of their web presence. We also worked on this application, by the way, and just on this one too, because the Smithsonian is the world's biggest museum network, and it uses Orchard too. This is the website of the record label Smithsonian Folkways Recordings, and it's a pretty complex one, including a huge music catalog with a streaming feature and a shop. And this, by the way, is an agency from the US federal government. And in between, we have US state governments, like the Employment Security Department of Washington State, which also uses Orchard. And finally, if you like to check out other exemplary Orchard Core websites, Orchard One or Orchard Core websites, check out our site Show Orchard. This is where we gather a gallery of sites that we think are nice. By the way, the latest one is Lombiq.com, because we recently launched our new website. Our old one was also a decade old. It did run on Orchard, but it was Orchard One. The new one has a new design and runs on Orchard Core. And now that we have seen not just or heard about the basics of Orchard and seen a couple of examples, let's actually try the whole thing locally. So now I will switch to Visual Studio and show you an Orchard using solution. By the way, this is the solution that I have here. I generated it with a script, because there are code generation templates for Orchard as well. So it's just a solution file, and it has a couple of projects that I will show you. So let's see it in Visual Studio. And yeah, it's a web application. So at the root, we have this web project. As you can see, it's a standard ASP.NET Core project, targeting .NET 7. And what makes it an Orchard Core using application are pretty much these two packages. With this package, I'm including pretty much all of Orchard. So this includes everything. You don't need to use the whole of Orchard, as I mentioned. You can select which packages you actually need, but I figured that, well, let's do the whole thing. And here are also two other projects in this solution. One is a so-called module. A module is one is a so-called module, and the other one is a so-called theme. Both are kind of plugins for Orchard. We call them extensions in Orchard. And the module is an extension which is more about the functionality, extending the functionality of Orchard using web app, while a theme is more about the look and feel. So basically, you would put most of your C# into modules and most of your CSS, JavaScript, and HTML into themes. But before writing some code that we'll also do, let me start this application and let's see how the whole thing looks like in action. We are immediately greeted by the Orchard setup screen. So let's check out what's in here. The whole thing is localized, as you can see. The Orchard supports localization as well. It, by the way, builds on the ASP.NET Core localization infrastructure. And then we can configure our setup. First, let's name our website. Let's call it demo. And then we have to select a recipe. Now, most of the things that you configure here can be changed later. There are just a couple of things that you can't change later, and one of them. So what are recipes? What are we talking about here? A recipe in Orchard is basically a JSON file that contains some content and configuration. So that means that you can export a recipe from a site and import it on another site to move content and configuration between two Orchard sites. Secondly, you can also use recipes for kind of templating sites. We call them setup recipes. And these are what are listed here. These are the built-in ones, but you can also create your own ones. For example, you can build a blog, a template of a blog site. You can export the whole thing into a recipe, and then you can use that recipe to set up any number of blocks, one after each other. And you don't have to do that for blog because that's something built into Orchard, but you can also create your own setup recipes. But let's use blog for now. You can also select the time zone the site will use, and then the database engine. Orchard supports multiple kinds of databases, as you can see listed here. For local development, we recommend SQLite because, that's just a file. It's super easy to use. You don't need to install anything, nothing to worry about. And if you want to wipe the site, you just need to delete the database. But when it comes to production sites, we recommend something like SQL Server. But for now, let's stick to SQLite. And I will create an admin user. Oops. For the password, I will use the very safe, very secure password 1, exclamation mark. Of course, never use that in production. We are just using it for development.
It's green, Zoltán. It's green, yes? So it's secure. It's green, the color, so it's secure. Okay.
Good observation. And this is, by the way, an example of how you can cheat in these password strength indicators. Don't use that.
Yes.
And now we see a simple blog. As you can see, it has some title. It has a single blog post that also has a title, some subtitle, some metadata, also categorization and tags. We can also open it, and then it has some pictures, also a body here. And finally, we also have a menu here with a home link and an about page, which is just a simple content page. So nothing extra, but let's check out the admin area now. And I will log in with the same admin password. And this is Orchard's admin. It's pretty straightforward, I think. So let's dive into how content management works in Orchard, because we are mostly talking about the CMS, so content is king. How do we manage content? And here we already see a blog, a link, and indeed here we can manage our blog posts like this one. And yeah, as usual, or as we would probably expect, our block has a title, it has a permalink, it also has a body, and a few other things. And by the way, there are also a couple of interesting buttons here. Let me actually check out this preview feature. And this preview feature is something pretty cool. It's some live preview. So if I change anything here, you see that on the right-hand side, it changes on each keystroke. So with this live preview feature, you can see how the content you edit will look like. Also, let's check out this About page. Now, let me go back to the menu, and the other content items, apart from the blog, are actually listed here under content items. And our About page is actually listed here. Let me exit the preview. So this is the page that we are looking at. And by the way, you already may have noticed something curious, because let me open the blog post again. Do you notice similarities? Well, our article has a title, and our blog post also has a title. Both of them have a permalink as well. Both of them have a body, but actually the article has something called an HTML body, and the blog post has something called a Markdown body. But what's happening here? Are those titles and permalinks actually the same thing? And yes, they are actually the same thing. What we see in action here is Orchard's content model. It's Orchard's flexible content model, where you can use building blocks, to reusable building blocks, to build your content. Because until now, what I've shown you are what we call in Orchard content items. So this article on the left-hand side is a content item, and this blog post on the right-hand side is also a content item. But the article is a content item that has the content type called article. So this is kind of an instance of an article. And if you check out content definition and content types here, we'll also see all the content types, which are kind of the blueprints of content items. So if you check out article here, you see that this is kind of the configuration of an article. This is basically the data schema, if you will. And apart from some metadata, you can see that it has something called content parts. Now that's the third piece of the terminology that I wanted to tell you. Content parts are the building blocks. For example, you see title. The title part is about this field here. The outer out part is about this permalink field here. And the HTML body is about this HTML body functionality here. Now, if you take a look at a blog post and the blog post content type, we will see something very similar. It also has title part, it also has outer out part, and it has a Markdown body part, which is something different. So these content parts are the building blocks of Orchard's content model. You take such content parts and create content types. Content types like this blog post content type. And then you can create instances of that content type, like one specific blog post, like the one that we see on the left-hand side here. And that means that if you want to change how a blog post works, you can change it. You can remove content parts. You can add new parts here. You can, by the way, also add something called fields, which are something simpler than content parts, but it's not important right now. You can also configure content parts. You can create your own content parts. So when we are building a web application with Orchard, it's pretty much never that we just use what's built into Orchard. We always extend Orchard. We write our code. We create our own content parts. We create our own content types. And by the way, this content type that I'm showing you here, the blog post, can be edited from the admin, but you can also create this from code as well. So this is the basics of the core of Orchard, the content model. So again, I've talked to you about the basic building blocks, which are the content parts. I've talked about how content parts build up content types. And when you want to instantiate those content types, that's when you create content items. So these are the three important things. And actually, there's a lot more in Orchard. For example, there's also media management. So if you want to attach images or documents or whatnot to your content items, you upload them to the media library. You can also manage menus. So that menu that we have seen on the top of the site can be managed by hand as well. There's also search and indexing. By default, Orchard provides indexing, full text indexing with Lucene, but there's also Elasticsearch available if you like to use something that's external to the application. Of course, there's also user management. The Orchard has role-based access control. Here you can see the user that I've created on the setup screen. By the way, this is a local user account. But just as everything in Orchard, this is also extensible, and it has a lot more features. By default, we use local user accounts, but external authentication is also available. So you can authenticate with Azure Active Directory, for example, or Twitter, Facebook, Google authentication. The user accounts can be external as well. And then we have roles, which define what specific users can do. Like, for example, here's the editor role, and all of these checkboxes you see here are for permissions. This long list here is a list of permissions in Orchard. You have fine-grained control over what you allow specific roles. Like, for example, to begin with, the users with the editor role can access the admin area, but you can also disallow that. And then there's a lot of built-in features of Orchard, but not all of them are enabled by default. If we check out this features menu here, this long list here is the list of features that Orchard has, but not all of them are enabled. You see, this one is, for example, enabled, but this one, actually this Twitter authentication that I mentioned, is not enabled. So you can selectively enable and disable everything. And by the way, this is also part of Orchard's extensibility. So I mentioned that when it comes to working with Orchard, we are pretty much never just using Orchard as it is. We always extend it. And I mentioned modules and themes in the beginning. Now, modules are one of the ways of extending Orchard, and the list that you see here are modules as well. They are built-in modules, but the same kind of modules that you can also create to extend Orchard. And one of the cool things of Orchard that can also be used for extending it in a bit different way are workflows. So let me actually enable them, because usually we write some C# code when we want to extend Orchard and how it behaves, but workflows is an option too. The workflows are pretty much visual programming from the admin area. So let's see it in action. Let me create a workflow. And once we have it, we get kind of a canvas where we can add events and tasks, and we can do some visual programming. What I will do here is something very simple. I will display a message when we publish a blog post, just like that. So every workflow starts with an event. And for example, we have this content published event available as well. By the way, this list, just as everything in Orchard, is extensible as well. All of these boxes that you see here, you can add your own. You can change them. What I'm showing you is just the default built-in functionality of Orchard, but everything can be changed. So let's start this workflow with the content published event, and let's configure that it listens to blog post content types, and that sorry, and then let's also add a task. Let's also add a task that will display a message, that will display a notification. Workflows are always like this. You start with an event, and then you have a task, or you have more tasks. Because you see there's this simple... Sorry, I have to quickly blow my nose. Because there's this notify task that will display a notification. But there are more complex tasks here as well, like a for each, which is exactly like a for each in C#, or conditions with if-else, or a for loop. You can do a lot of things with workflows. And again, as mentioned, this is like visual programming. But still, you can also extend with your own code, with your own tasks, this list too. But let me add the notification, and let me display a message here. You may notice that I'm using these brackets here, and user.identity.name probably rings a bell for you, because this is ASP.NET Core identity. And why I can use something like this is because this field has Liquid support. Liquid, if you don't know it, is a templating language. It was originally created by Shopify, and it's a safe but quite powerful templating language. In Orchard, we use it for templating, but it's just one option because you can also use Razor for templates, and also to have dynamic texts configured from the admin like this. So this way, we'll say thank you and then username. So let me save that. And now if I connect this event to the notification task and also make this the start task, then we have a workflow. And pretty much that's it. Although this is a very simple workflow, mind you. So let me go back to the blog and publish this blog post. And you see that it indeed works. So congratulations to us. There's also one other feature that I wanted to show you because it's quite an important one, and that's called audit trail. It's also something that's not enabled by default. An audit trail is a record of everything that happens in the system. Pretty much if you want to know who changed what on the site, the audit trail will tell you. So first let's configure it, and let's tell it that it should save events for blog posts again. Because by default, it's not recording content events for blog posts. And now I will show you something new. I didn't yet explain it, but there are these buttons, publish and save draft. What are these? Orchard also offers content versioning. If I change something here, let me open the blog post. If I change something here and then click Save Draft, then you will see that if I refresh on the right-hand side, nothing changed. Of course, nothing changed because I just saved a draft version. That's not the published version. But if I click Publish here, then it does change because now I also published that draft. What's more, there are also versions being saved by Orchard behind the scenes. So if I change this again and then publish it, well, it will change again on the front end. But when we go to audit trail, we'll be able to see the different versions. Because this version 3 was the original version just after we enabled audit trail. And you can see that this has the change title, and then I change it again. If we check out the details, we will see that there's even a diff view where we can look at the differences between different versions of this content item. So with the audit trail, you can see also who changed content and what changed in that content. And finally, we enable two modules now, two features of two modules, but the other kind of extensions that I mentioned in the beginning are themes, and themes are kind of plugins that affect the look and feel of a site. And we actually have our demo theme listed here too. So let me go back to Visual Studio. And you remember that we have our theme here? Sorry, you remember that we have our theme here. Now that theme is what's here. This was also generated by the code generation template, and it doesn't contain too much code, but this is where you would put all your templates, again, either Liquid or Razor. By default, it's there's only a Liquid template, and all your CSS and JavaScript. Now let's make this the current theme, and let's check out what happens. Well, as you can see, our site is very ugly now. Of course, it's very ugly because our theme doesn't contain any code, except for this single Liquid file. And this Liquid file is just the basic HTML document. So let's try to change something here. I will add hello, save, and refresh on the left-hand side here. And, well, it actually worked. If you want to override or customize the look and feel of your site, this is how you would start. You write your code on the right or on the left, and then you just refresh in the browser, and immediately you will see the changes. Now, most of the time you wouldn't start a theme from scratch, but you can also kind of inherit themes. That means that you can, in your theme, you can define that your theme's base theme should be, for example, a block theme. That means that the built-in block theme that we used before will provide all the basic styling, and then you can just write your overrides in your own theme. Now, what's a bit more interesting is C# code, actually. So what I forgot to open, and that's why I was scrambling to open it here while I'm talking. What I wanted to show you was some C# code. So I opened Orchard Core's source code here too. Here we see the full Orchard Core solution. And as you can see, it's pretty big with more than 200 projects. So yeah, that's a lot of code and a lot of projects. Actually, it's so big that the MS Build and the Roslyn teams are using Orchard for benchmarking. And what I wanted to show you was the title module, because this is the title module that drives the title part. So if we go back to the admin here, and check out our blog, for example, our blog post, this title is this title functionality, this title text box is driven by the title part. And here we can see how it's implemented. It's a class called title part. Now, this is not the full picture, but this is how it starts when you create your own custom content part. Because I'm showing you code from Orchard, but this is exactly how you would also do it. And this title property here stores, well, this title from here. It also needs to somehow be displayed and edited. And this title part.edit.cshtml is that drives this editor here. So this input field is actually this field. And pretty much that's the editor of the title part. As you can see, it's not a full form. It's not a full form because we are just creating a single building block of a content type. We are extending Orchard. We are not building something on its own in vacuum, but rather we are plugging into the APIs of Orchard and we create an editor just for our title. And this is the editor, but how it's displayed is like this. So when we open a blog post and the title is displayed here, well, this is coming from this Razor template. Now, of course, there's much more to it, but I just wanted to give you a taste of how to write code for Orchard. So some closing remarks. If you want to host an Orchard website somewhere, you can host it pretty much anywhere where .NET runs. So just as .NET, Orchard is cross-platform. Recently, we also got it certified for Red Hat Enterprise Linux. It can also run under IaaS, so if you want to use something like Azure App Services, that's also available. And since it can also be containerized, Docker is an option too. And if you want to just use Orchard, but you don't want to host it yourself, you can check out our SaaS, because we have a SaaS, an Orchard Core SaaS called .nest, where you can sign up and get Orchard sites for free. That way, you can use Orchard, you can customize it, you can even write your own themes, but you don't have to worry about the hosting. And, well, if you liked it, and I really hope you did, then here's some further reading. OrchardCore.net is the project's homepage. That's something that I definitely recommend first checking out. Orchard Dojo is our training and learning website. So there you can check out the weekly blog post about the news of Orchard, what we also send out via newsletter. And the Dojo course tutorial series is also available there, which guides you from zero to becoming an Orchard Core developer. If you like to not watch videos, but check out code and play with code, then I recommend you our training demo module, because that shows you working with the Orchard fully from code. So it's an Orchard module, but it's thoroughly documented. It has a huge amount of commands, and it's also a walkthrough. So you go step by step, and you see the code, how you can work with Orchard's APIs. So that was it for me for today, at least. So thank you for your attention. If you would like to get in touch with me, here are some contacts. If you are starting some ASP.NET Core development project nowadays and would like to have some advices, I would be more than happy to help. And I hope that you will consider Orchard Core as well. And now perhaps we have some time for questions, right?
Yes, thank you, Zoltán. There are no questions, but I want to say you that I am like in a wonderland or something like that, because it's incredible, this kind of CMS, and it's incredible. And thank you for the job that you made in Lombiq itself, because one of the three suggestions was just arrived from there. Because the only question can be when and where do I start from, and there were answers from there. And then I think that that kind of magic that we have seen can be understood just by experiments and moving around in the Orchard CMS environment, right?
That's right. Yes. It's open source, free. You don't need anything special to run Orchards on your local machine. You can use Visual Studio or something else, Visual Studio Code, Rider. So
Okay.
if you just want to try it out, you can very easily do that.
Okay. Just a question for me. That
Mhm.
is, how is the learning curve of this kind of work? Okay, of CMS with Orchard Core.
Mhm. It very highly depends on what your current experiences are. Of course, if you are just starting with .NET, then it will be harder because Orchard is a complex project. It's it also uses pretty much the latest C# and the latest .NET. So to work with it, it definitely helps if you know that. Um, to give you give you an example for a professional, when we have onboarded new team members to our team who already worked with ASP.NET Core but have never heard of Orchard before, then from that 0 point, getting them to have a working Orchard Core application with their own custom content part, their own custom module, their own custom theme, uh, that was 2 days.
2 days?
Yes.
Ah,
Well,
okay. It's like a RAD solution. It's like a rapid application development, and um, also have this time. It's better than Power Apps and having a site done.
probably yes. That's of course just the beginning. So that's when they started to become productive, but there's a lot more to learn, of course. Because again, Orchard is a complex system. So definitely 2 days is not to get the whole system understood,
Of course,
but
yes.
that's when you can get productive.
To understand the concepts, and so can go on its way to experiment and to understand how to move the pieces inside the entire environment, right?
Yep, and how to extend it. So how to swap out Orchard's functionality, how to create your own what you can do from your own modules, because content parts is just one thing, but you can pretty much override and extend everything in Orchard. And what goes to the browser is also completely customizable. So one of the questions that usually comes up during these talks is, can I use Angular? Can I use Vue? Can I use Bootstrap? And to all of
Okay.
these questions, the answer is yes, because Orchard doesn't force you to use anything.
Okay, perfect. Zoltán, I will remove the slide now. Okay, your screen, remain alone, just to inform our community that you are a guest in another community in 2 hours, more or less, in Pennsylvania, right?
So it's Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh in
.NET
Pennsylvania.
user group, I think.
Yes, perfect. So have a nice talk there too. And thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for spending your time with us. I think that we will have you as guest again in September, or maybe October, or maybe August. We have to understand which is the best date that fit your book. Okay. And thank you so much, Zoltán, for having presented the Orchard CMS. I will do it for myself, maybe trying to build one of the possibilities, maybe for not a blog. The question is, can be good for an e-commerce, for example, or not?
Mhm. Yes, you can also
Okay.
use it for e-commerce. There's an official module called, or rather, a suite of modules called Orchard Core Commerce. Uh,
Okay.
it's an
Perfect.
official one, but actually we at Lombiq are mainly developing it. It's pretty much a full open source e-commerce solution for Orchard Core, including with Stripe payments, product catalog,
Fantastic.
inventory management, whatever. You can use it for free as well, and it's also available on .NET, by the way.
Perfect. Zoltán, your answer is perfect for us. Okay. Thank you so much. Have a nice evening and have a nice talk in 2 hours. And thank you for being with us. Okay.
Thank you for having me.
Io ringrazio anche tutti in italiano, ringrazio tutti quelli che sono all'ascolto e ricordo che la puntata verrà comunque registrata e resa disponibile su Codemotion. Thank you so much, Zoltán. Bye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.